I'm going to do it again. Welcome, everyone, to the Thriving Creative podcast. I am your host, Gabrielle Senza. I am thrilled to be here today. Today, we are talking about rejection. Rejection is such a scary thing for many, many, many people, most everyone, pretty much. Why? Because it hurts. It's painful. It kind of makes us question our whole um, sense of worth and whether our work is speaking to people or not. So as artists, we frequently subject ourselves to a lot of rejection, not because our work isn't good, but because of the nature of what it takes to get our work out into the world. So I know I'm jumping ahead. I didn't hit record a moment ago when I first started the live. And so I just want to say thank you for coming on to watch The Thriving Creative. This is where art, money, and pleasure meet, and this is where we explore how these pieces factor into creating a thriving creative life. So before we begin our sessions, I typically love to just get grounded for a minute. And the way I usually do that, and I could certainly use it now because I've been running right up to the last minute, is just simply a few slow, deep breaths. So I invite you to do this with me if you'd like. And you can keep your eyes open or not. Feel your seat in the chair or on the couch or on the ground, wherever you happen to be. Or if you're standing, just feel your feet on the ground. And take a long, slow, deep breath in and allow yourself to arrive. Another deep breath in and relaxing with the gravity on your exhale. Feeling yourself supported by the seat, by the ground. One more. Okay. So I feel like with even just 3 short breaths, I have essentially moved away, put behind me all the things that preceded this portion of the day. I am also rather out of my element. I am on the West Coast. And so for me here, I am recording this at 11 o'clock in the morning. And normally in the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts, I am doing the recording at 2 p.m. Eastern. So I know it's 2 p.m. Eastern for you all out there. Hello, I love you. I miss you. And I'm glad you're here with me. And I also really love the fact that I'm here. I am in Westlake Village. I'm staying at a lovely Four Seasons resort, which is incredible. My partner is here for a conference, and so I got to tag along. And this morning I was in the hot tub out in this pool area. It's called the Cove. And I was in the hot tub. I was reading this book that my partner and I are both reading called A Year to Live, and it's by Stephen Levine. And it's quite fascinating. It brings up a lot of interesting questions, but that's not what I'm talking about today. I just wanted to share sort of where I'm coming from. So yes, I took a dive in the pool after the hot tub, and then I got some food and landed back here in the hotel room where it's quiet. I know there won't be blaring music or people walking by and a lot of distractions. So although I'd love to be outside with you all, we can't control the environment so much. So here we are. So let's dive in. Why? Why do I want to talk about rejection? Well, primarily it's because it's a really hard thing for people to deal with just on the everyday. And artists are really hesitant. I've found that artists are really hesitant to call themselves artists. And I've talked about this in other episodes, partly because they're not making their living a full-time living or however they want to define it by making art, by writing poetry, by making paintings, by making music, by putting out songs and anything creative of that nature. So that's one issue. The other issue is that I've found that it's the fear of rejection that really holds people back from doing what they're moved to do creatively. So I want to break it down a little bit. Why do we do art? What is the value of art? Why are we moved to do art? Well, for many of us, and I imagine for anyone who's listening who is a creative, first you do art not because you want it to be hanging on walls and selling for loads of money. That's not the primary reason you're doing it. The primary reason, most likely, is that you're moved by something that stirs within you, within your heart, within your soul, that you feel needs to be expressed somehow. And that might be expressed through poetry, might be expressed through a painting, might be expressed through drawings, uh, any number of ways, a song. And then the next part, after you've made some art, after you've done some creative work, you might feel compelled to share it with the world, right? That's where it gets really scary because for most people, first, your number one audience for your creativity, for your creative work is you and only you, really, honestly. Are you meeting your own expectations with the work that you've created? Are the words rolling together, fitting together, expressing what it is you really are feeling in your heart to express? Or is the painting arriving at the level of expression that you're really wanting to create there, right? So here's an interesting thing I was thinking about with creativity, I mean, with rejection specifically, is that let's say we do this, we reject things in our work as part of the creative process in the very act of creating, right? So let's say you're, excuse me, you're writing a poem. So you're on your typewriter or on your computer or writing in your notebook, whatever it is, and you put down a string of words, and then you look back at it and you're like, oh, this word isn't quite right. I think this word would be better. Same with songs, right? So you're putting out your lyrics, you're writing them, you're playing with them, finding which ones work, which ones don't. So there's a natural process of rejection within our own work. It's an editing process, right? And so the same is true with our paintings. So if we're mixing up a color and it has a little bit too much blue in it and we want it to be a little more green, there are a variety of ways to make it the greenish blue that we want. Uh, but that's just a natural part of the process. We just add a little, we take away, we, change. Sometimes we have to scrap it altogether. We are rejecting that piece, that one piece, right? It's not the whole painting. It's not our whole career. It's not our whole desire to create. We're using it as a form of editing. So when it comes to that's, I just want to, express, like, we have our own editing thing that's happening in our brains with our own creative work. That's just the way it goes. That's part of creating the work that we want to create. And that's what makes it ours, unique to us. So we're not afraid of it when we're creating, typically, right? It's an accepted part of how we discern whether the piece has arrived at the level we want it to arrive at for our own, I want to say judgment, but I don't really want to use the word judgment, but at our own opinion. In our own opinion, have I pushed the painting? Have I made this painting express in a way I really want to express this? Has this poem arrived at the flow that I really want it to have? Does this song have the lyrics that I really feel convey the essence of the mood that I was after or the message I was after? So that's one piece, right? Our own creative editing process requires judgment, discernment, rejection of some ideas, and replacement, right? So that's all pretty normal in our creative process. What feels icky and scary is when we start sharing that work with other people. If we get to the point where we say, like, it might be really nice to get some feedback on this. It might be really nice to do a whole series of paintings that are around this message with this kind of aesthetic to it, or a series of poems, or a series of short stories, or whatever it is. And then we have choices. that we have to make. We have to decide who it is we're going to share the work with. And we want to be really cautious about who it is we're sharing our work with. Why? Because a lot of people don't share the same aesthetic as you do. A lot of people might come from a completely different background and just like, in some cases, just dislike abstract art because they don't understand it, for example. And so if you're making a series of abstract paintings, you don't want to share your work with the people that don't like abstract work, right? So you have to find people that you feel pretty confident can look at your work and receive it. And also, I highly recommend when you choose to share your work, you do it with a specific request attached. So you might say, I'd really love to show you this work I am doing. This will be the first time I'm showing it to anybody, and I'm nervous about it. And I would just like to get your sense of how you feel in response to it. What emotions come up for you around this piece? Um, what what do you see in it? You know, you might want them to just read into it themselves and see what kind of response the work is getting. And don't limit it to just that one person's opinion or uh, what's the word? Sense of understanding it, because they might totally miss it. They might totally not get what it is you're after with the song or the poem or the painting, and that's okay. You can say, you can be specific. What is it you like about this piece? What are the things you think are really strong about this piece? What are the things you think you would like to see more of or hear more of or uh, sit in the experience of? So that's when you're reaching out for some feedback on your work. Now, I'm going to jump to the whole idea now of putting your work out there for publishing, for galleries, for things like that. So just like you're choosing carefully who it is you're showing and sharing your work with, you want to do the same with publishers, with galleries, with grants. You know, we subject ourselves to so many opportunities for rejection as artists when we want to get our work out into the world. And to limit the amount of rejection, we want to be really selective about where we're sharing it and how we're sharing it. So we want to choose a gallery that's approachable, not the top best gallery in the whole wide world if you've never had an exhibition ever, right? Uh, Having a gallery like that take your work on the first go is really extraordinarily unlikely. So save yourself the rejection, save yourself the hurt and the pain, and instead find an appropriate location to get started. Because the more you can make it easy and comfortable and pleasant, it comes into pleasure here, is that your work is in an environment that's not high pressure. And meanwhile, there are people in there that you respect whose opinions you would love to get. And you'd love to receive the feedback. How are people receiving this work? Are they enjoying it? If you have a guest book in the gallery space or in the cafe or in the library exhibit, wherever you're putting your work, and people can comment on the work that you're putting there, most likely you're going to get really positive things. People generally are kind, thank goodness. And they most generally are supportive of people who are daring to share their heart and their soul. Because not everybody has the courage to do that, right? And even if they had the courage to do that, they might not be clear about what the message is that they want to share or the way they want to express it. They might just, take one poetry workshop and then think like, oh, I don't know, poetry is so complicated and I need to do this and that and the other thing. And then they might say, That's not for me, that's too hard," or something. Uh, Actually, there's something similar that happened to me when I was like a teenager. I was watching somebody paint a painting, and he was using oil paint on canvas, and he was making a beautiful landscape. It was a commission that my family had asked for as a gift for my grandmother. And I really loved watching him do this. It was just like so meditative and fascinating, and watching him mix up the paints and put it on the canvas with his brushes and everything. And then once he left the home, our house, I pulled out the paint supplies that I had, which were nothing like the paint supplies he had. What I had were watercolors and paper and brushes, really crappy brushes, and I had no idea how to use them. And I just attempted to figure it out kind of based on what I had seen him do. And I tell you, it was the most excruciating experience in my creative life that I've ever had and that I can ever remember. Because if you've ever tried to use watercolor on paper that's not prepared for that, it's just sticks there. And the paint doesn't glide, it doesn't move, it doesn't blend, it's just stuck there. It's like a marker, like when you try to draw with a marker, like you can't blend it. At least back then you couldn't blend marker ink, but now you can with certain markers. But anyway, that's beside the point. The point is, I had that was a moment of decision. And the decision I made at that moment is, I don't know how to paint. I'm terrible at painting. I basically rejected myself. I rejected my creativity. I rejected my willingness to try something new. And then I was afraid to paint for a very long time. It wasn't until um, I was much later, many years later, when I actually started learning how to paint through courses and painters and friends of mine that could actually show me how to use paint. And then it was much more of a success. So there are these things that happen, like there's the potential for rejecting yourself and rejecting your courage to try or trying something and failing. And I think I said in the last episode, or one of the episodes, that there's really no such thing as failure. It's just feedback, right? So at that point, I could have just, when I so horribly failed at trying to make a painting with watercolors, instead of saying, oh, I'm a failure, it's a failure, I'm never going to try this again, it's horrible, I could have just said, oh, this is interesting feedback. I guess I don't know what I'm doing, and there's more to learn, right? So there's always more to learn. So let's see. I'm realizing I'm totally not even going on my notes here. And I want to make sure that I cover the things that I actually was planning on sharing with you. So let's see. I'm going to look at my notes over here. So how is it that we can build resilience around rejection? Well, first of all, it's really important to not take it personally. When you do start sharing your work out in the world with people whose opinion you really appreciate, whether they're a publisher or a gallery or curator or musician friends, don't let it totally tank you personally. Don't take it personally. This was a really hard thing for me to learn because I used to take everything personally. I mean, somebody couldn't make an expression about something that I didn't feel somehow had something to do with me. So noting that and realizing like, okay, that's a thing that I may do, and I don't need to take it personally. And I don't have to get angry. So this is when being able to self-regulate your emotions, noticing like, oh, I'm feeling really anxious, or oh, I'm feeling really hurt or really embarrassed about this form of rejection, this opinion that I'm getting, or no response at all. So artists often, in order to show our work, we often need to be submitting it to these calls for art, um, and also grant applications and um, other contests of different kinds, I suppose. Same with writers, right? So if you're submitting your work, you are submitting to potential rejection. And the point is, don't take it personally and don't make it about the work. There are a million reasons why your work might not be accepted into that particular pool or a contest or whatever it is. Some of them could be you didn't meet the right criteria. For example, maybe it was a small work show and you sent, and the limit was 12 by 12 inches, and you sent images of paintings that are 24 by 24. Well, they cannot receive that work into the show for pretty obvious reasons. So you have to be really careful about making sure you understand what the requirements are that the galleries are asking for or that the publishers are asking for. Sometimes they'll say for publishing work, it cannot already have been published somewhere else, including maybe on your own blog. You know, sometimes maybe you'll put your poems, your songs, whatever it is, your writing, long form, short form, on a blog. Well, that is officially, you know, literally it's published and available out into the world, unless of course you make it private and nobody can read it. And then that's okay too. Just knowing that that's your choice, that you don't want other people to see it. But the point is, be really diligent about understanding what the requirements are for the particular call for submissions. Other reasons it might not work, it might just not be their taste, or you might not fit in to the theme that they're working with. Maybe they're doing figurative work and you're sending them abstract paintings, or they want to publish sonnets and you're sending them long form poetry or something, you know? So that's, you know, just pay attention to what are the parameters for the submission. And yeah, so those are some of the reasons. There are lots and lots more. I don't want to take up all the time on that. So the other thing is, if you, the more important thing than how it's being received is how is the process for you in making it, and what is the process like for submitting it to these places, because it's just a process and just practice. There are several grant writers that say, and actually grantors who say, if you have not received a grant, you have not yet sent out enough grant proposals. Okay, so that means you're likely to eventually get a grant. And that means in order to get a grant, you need to submit your applications. And not just once, not just twice, not just 5 times, possibly 100 different grant applications. But again, very selectively, very conscientiously, making sure that you are meeting the requirements that they're putting out there for you, because they don't like rejecting people either. And they don't want people to feel hopeless and dejected. However, they are trying to accomplish a certain thing, just like we are in our work. We have a vision to create something, and it's going to look or sound or feel like this. And that's what the gallerists, the curators, the publishers, the musician producers are looking for. They're wanting to create their own vision of an experience for their audience. And they're inviting artists in who work within that. And they're all different kinds of experiences that people are creating in the world. And so just because you're rejected from one doesn't mean you're going to be rejected from another. You might be the superstar of the next one that you apply for. And I highly recommend, whenever you can, create your own events. That means, you know, go where you're loved, create something that's fairly easy to produce, say an exhibition in a local cafe or a library or some other fairly public space that doesn't have a high pressure sales aspect to it, so that you can get the practice of learning what it takes to professionally present your work, right? So having your work, you know, nicely framed and ready to hang is super important. If it arrives at a gallery not ready to hang, they're likely to just reject it and say, sorry, wasn't ready to hang. We can't show your work. You didn't follow the instructions. Don't do that to yourself. Just make sure you're reading the instructions, you're following through. If you don't know how to do something, ask. Ask someone who does know how, or check out YouTube, find out what's going on there. Pretty much anything you need to learn, you can learn on YouTube. You've probably heard that before, so I'm just going to remind you. So, like I said with the grants, basically every no is a step towards the next yes, and the right yes, where you fit, where it works, where your work is desired. It's totally the right fit. So don't take each no personally. Okay, let me take a quick look at my notes again. Okay, so I have a lot of notes here, so I can't share them all right now. Let's see. So here's an idea. What if you celebrated rejection? What if it was something to celebrate because it means that you learned something? You learned that you are unclear about how to do something, or you have submitted to the wrong kind of venue for your work. Maybe you've learned like, oh, my presentation wasn't professional enough. How can I make it more professional? That's where I need to focus my attention for learning on how to improve my presentation, my grant writing skills, my framing, my hanging, making sure you have the right hardware on the back of your paintings so they can be hung easily. Writing better letters, all these kinds of things. There's so many opportunities where you can improve. And so any rejection you receive is just like a redirect. And it's like, well, maybe I could do better trying it this way. And then if that doesn't work, you try another way, or you try it the same way, but with 10 different places, right? So remembering that just because one person said no doesn't mean the next 10 are going to say no, or that the next 50 will say no. It just means that person said no. And so that's a way to approach it. And you can even, keep a scorecard. Like okay, rejection number 1, 2, 3, 4, 100, you'll find some really fun stories out there of really famous creatives that you've all heard of who have had countless rejections, countless rejections. I think there was one artist who papered her bathroom with the rejection slips she received from publishers. It might have been a male artist. It doesn't matter. I don't remember. So the point is, keep going, keep trying, keep doing it. Learn, adjust, love yourself. Find pleasure in the places where you can find pleasure in the process, right? Lately, I've been getting a lot of satisfaction out of playing with ChatGPT and asking ChatGPT to teach me things that I don't really know. Like, how do you write a really strong grant proposal? How do you efficiently and cost effectively frame a series of works, of paintings, for example? And you can just do a regular Google search on these things. It doesn't have to be ChatGPT. I like to have ChatGPT help me think through the statements, the paragraphs, the descriptions, the different things that I need to supply to the gallery or the publisher, whoever it is, the grant applications. So it can help me think through how I need to describe something, and it can give me a draft, and then I can tweak it and make it sound like me, and make sure that it represents my ideas and what's important to me to get across. Because sometimes ChatGPT will think that some other aspect of my work is the more important thing to point out. It doesn't think that, but it just processes it that way because it happens to be the first thing I listed, as opposed to stating that this is the most important message I want to get across. You see, anyway, I'm slipping into teaching about ChatGPT, which I do love to do. And I did a teaching on that recently in the Create Collective, which is a community for artists to receive support, community, accountability, guidance, coaching on their creative development, on how to bring their work out into the world, or just holding space for getting stuff done, especially those things we don't really want to do. We have time and space available for that. So I taught a workshop just last week on 3 fun things to use ChatGPT to help fund your art, right? So I love teaching. I love talking about ChatGPT and sharing really amazing tips on how people can use it to make their lives simpler, to fund their artwork, to come up with a plan of action, to organize a trip. I mean, there are a million different ways to use it. It's really fun. Anyway, that's a separate thing. Let's see. So I'm inviting you to celebrate each no as a step towards your next yes. I really encourage you to not take any rejections personally. Just, what can I learn from this? How do I move on? How can I improve? Right? It's not you're bad. It's just that your work didn't fit for that particular setting. Let's see. Yes. Oh, another really important thing is to, like I was saying in the beginning, when you're sharing your work, be really intentional about the kind of community you want to spend your time in, particularly around creative work. So let's say there's a really good, what do you call it? Maybe where you live, there are really good poetry slams, and you're nervous about showing your work or sharing your work. Well, just go and listen and see how it works, and see what people are saying and how they're presenting and how people are responding to the way they're presenting. The same is true with open mic nights. If you're a musician and you want to start sharing your work, it is so scary to do that. I totally agree. I am nervous every time. I'm even nervous before I get on my podcast show. And it's okay. The cool thing is that you've survived every time that you've been uncomfortable so far. So that's something to celebrate. So you build the muscle, the courage muscle, you build your level of comfort and being with other people, and just pay attention to the people who are presenting their work and how they're doing it, how it's being received, how it relates to your work or not. And when you find work that is relevant and resonant to your own, then that's a good place to explore and understand, like, how is that person getting their work out into the world? And what can I learn from that? And then you try to create your own version of that. And you can do that. It's really easy. It's really doable. I know you can do it. And what else do I want to share with this? Let's see. I wish that this was a live session where I could get feedback. In fact, I'm just realizing that, yes, we are live on Facebook. However, I'm also seeing that there are no comments here. So that's was a live session where I could get. So if you are on and you're watching live and you have a question, I just pulled up the chat over there so I would see it and you can ask a question. In the meantime, I'm going to review my notes one more time and see if there's anything else I wanted to share with you. I do have some stories that I pulled up that I wanted to share, and I didn't commit them to memory, so I haven't shared them yet. However, I could share them now. But I think instead I'm going to not continue on too much longer, because this could take a long time to share all these stories that I had. But perhaps I will just do a separate recording and just share the stories, and you can listen to them separately. But for now, I hope this was inspiring. I hope this helps alleviate some of the anxiety you have around sharing your work and the potential for being rejected. It's going to happen. It's definitely going to happen. You won't hit the ball every single time. You won't hit it out of the park every single time. I don't know anyone who has. I definitely don't know anyone who has hit it out of the park every time or even hit the ball. There are a lot of strikes, and that's okay. It happens. It's just part of the game. And one of the most important things is do not change your work for the sake of making it more acceptable to people. Like your work, your creative work has to be yours, and it has to express what your heart and your soul want to express in the world. And yes, you can improve your technique and your skills and your variety of expression and the places you can share it. You can change the scale or the medium and things like that, but don't compromise your vision, your message, your heart's calling, right? To say these things and have realistic expectations. Like I would recommend not expecting to become like the world's best novelist or the most famous painter in the world in a short period of time, perhaps even in your lifetime. The purpose of doing the writing is for your soul's satisfaction and for communicating ideas and bringing joy and light and beauty into the world, or thought-provoking questions, or whatever it is that is yours to do in the world. So yes, I really hope you won't get disheartened with rejections. They're going to happen, and it's okay. It doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't mean your work is bad. It just means it hasn't found the right place yet. So growth mindset is a big key thing. You can look into how to develop growth mindset. Continuing to try, don't give up, and just really assess, like, am I applying to the right spaces and the places? And meet with as many people as you can who are doing it and who are having success, and see how they're doing it. Learn from them, take workshops, get some feedback from people you trust, and you may learn something that's really valuable, and you can put that into practice and then start finding your way and feeling more successful as you put these pieces into place and you get positive responses, positive feedback. It's totally going to happen. The more you try, the more it'll happen. Anything else? Anything else I want to say? There's so much to say on this. There's so much to say. And I have experienced a lot of rejection in my own career, and I've talked about it on the show and in other places. And I am so driven by the process of doing the work and the desire to connect with people. And so whether it's commercially, financially successful, viable, is secondary in terms of my artwork and my creative experiences that I bring into the world, because I don't want to rely on my art and my expression for the financial pieces, because there's too much risk of the need for the financial pieces to be in place that could compromise the creative work and my messaging. And I've already experienced that. Didn't like it. It didn't work very well. And I'm not going to try it again. So it's okay to not be making your living from your artwork. You're still an artist if you're making an art and you're putting it out into the world. It has nothing to do with the financial returns on your artwork that determines whether your work is successful or whether you're successful. If you are making work, you are successful. If you're alive, you're successful. You're already successful at doing what you are here to do, right? So just take that financial piece off the table. Yes, you need to have a financial ground foundation from which to live, to work, to produce, to buy art materials, to submit to different places. It's true. Money is super important. That's why we talk about it on the show. And there are lots of ways that we can access money, where we can create foundations that are solid and where we can even build wealth and financial independence. And that is in support of our creative work and in support of our pleasure. And our pleasure and our creativity help enforce and enrich the financial returns that we're getting, not because of them, but we get to appreciate them more, and they all work together. So that's the piece about the AMP, the art, money, and pleasure, and how they work together, and what the show is about, the creative, the thriving creative. And I really hope that you will let me know in the comments what resonated here, what questions you might have. And if you need any support, reach out to me. You can do it in the messages. You could always book a one-to-one consultation. You can have a private consultation with me if you don't want to come on and share what it is you're working on, or share your creative work, or what your problems are, what your questions are, what your anxieties are. If you don't want to do that publicly, I totally understand. And you can book a session with me if you want to. And I will put the link to my calendar and what's involved in doing that in the show notes. And in the meantime, I hope you find great beauty and joy and pleasure in everything you do, and you put it into your artwork fearlessly, courageously. Put your work out there. The world needs it. I send you all my best, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.